Evelyn Grace Pemberton walked into the darkness at 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 1997, and never came back. Security cameras captured her final steps. Emerald silk gown. Diamond bracelet catching the light. One moment she was there, breathing, moving, alive. For minutes later she was gone. Her purse was found on the terrace steps. Her car sat in the parking lot, keys still dangling from the ignition. One of her heels lay abandoned on the gravel path, as if she'd simply stepped out of it mid-stride and kept walking, or running, or being dragged. No scream pierced the humid Charleston night. No witnesses came forward. No body was discovered. Just absence where a person used to be. By midnight, her mother was frantic. By dawn, police had swarmed the venue. By week's end, the entire city was searching. But Evelyn Grace Pemberton had vanished like smoke dissolving into air. And for 20 years no one knew why. No one knew where. No one knew who. Until a locked diary, hidden for 2 decades, began to speak. Before we unravel this haunting mystery together, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from right now? This story spans decades and crosses continents, but it might hit closer to home than you think. Now let's go back to the beginning. Evelyn Grace Pemberton wasn't just another name in a missing persons file. She wasn't a statistic, a headline, or a cold case number. She was a real person with dreams that would never be fulfilled, with a laugh her family would never hear again, with a future that was stolen in the darkness. Born on July 8, 1975, Evelyn was Charleston aristocracy. Her father, Judge Harrison Pemberton III, sat on the South Carolina Circuit Court. Her mother, Margaret Hawthorne Pemberton, came from old money, the kind of Southern wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Their home on Laguerre Street was a masterpiece of antebellum architecture, with columns that reached toward the sky and gardens that bloomed year-round. Evelyn attended Porter God School, where she excelled in art and literature. She painted watercolors of Rainbow Row, those pastel-colored houses that define Charleston's historic district. She volunteered at the Gibby's Museum of Art, guiding tourists through exhibits with enthusiasm that made even the skeptics fall in love with Southern culture. After high school, she enrolled at the College of Charleston to study art history. Her dream was simple but deeply personal. She wanted to open her own gallery, a space where local artists could showcase their work without the pretension that dominated the art world. Friends described her as luminous, kind but private. Someone who could light up a room at a charity gala but preferred quiet corners at coffee shops, sketching in her journal while the world moved around her. Her relationship with her family was complicated, as most family dynamics are. She was close with her younger brother Thomas, who idolized her. She was dutiful toward her mother, whose expectations weighed heavy. She was distant from her father, a stern man who believed in tradition and propriety above all else. And then there was Bradley Ashworth. They'd been dating for 8 months when she disappeared. Bradley was a third-year law student from another prominent Charleston family. On paper, they were perfect together, the kind of couple who appeared in the society pages of the Post and Courier, smiling at fundraisers and garden parties. Their relationship seemed destined for engagement, marriage, a continuation of 2 family legacies merging into one. But those closest to Evelyn noticed something shifting in the weeks before March 15, 1997. She became withdrawn. Distracted. She'd stare out windows during conversations, as if her mind was somewhere else entirely. Her best friend, Caroline Hutchins, would later tell police, "It was like she was carrying a secret too heavy to share. I asked her about it once and she just smiled this sad smile and said, 'Some things are better left unsaid.' I should have pushed harder." That secret was locked inside a leather-bound diary, hidden in a false bottom of her jewelry box. A diary that would remain silent for 20 years. The Charleston Heritage Gala was an institution, an annual fundraiser for historic preservation held at the Middleton Pinckney House, a plantation venue 20 minutes outside the city. On March 15, 1997, the weather was unseasonably warm, 78 degrees at sunset, the air thick with humidity and the scent of blooming jasmine. Evelyn arrived at 7:30 p.m. with Bradley Ashworth. She wore that emerald silk gown, custom-made by a local designer, that would later become the image forever associated with her disappearance. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. Diamond earrings, her grandmother's, caught the fading light. The timeline has been reconstructed from dozens of witness statements and security footage. 7:45 p.m., champagne reception in the grand foyer. Multiple witnesses see Evelyn smiling, chatting with other attendees, appearing completely normal. She poses for photographs with her mother and several family friends. 8:30 p.m. Seated dinner begins. Evelyn is at table 7 with Bradley and 6 others. A caterer working that night remembers that Evelyn barely touched her food, unusual for someone who, according to friends, loved Southern cuisine. Bradley would later admit to police that they'd argued quietly at the table about wedding planning, though he insisted it was minor, just stress about his upcoming bar exam. 9:15 p.m. The silent auction begins in the adjacent room. Evelyn excuses herself, telling Bradley she needs to use the restroom. Security footage captures her walking toward the ladies' lounge, her pace normal, nothing alarming. 9:42 p.m. She returns to the main hall, but something has changed. Maria Santos, a catering staff member, remembers this moment vividly. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking when she reached for a glass of water. I asked if she was okay and she just nodded, but her eyes looked terrified. 10:20 p.m. This is the moment everything pivots. Security cameras capture Evelyn near the garden entrance, engaged in what appears to be an intense conversation with an unidentified male figure. The man's face is obscured by shadows and the angle of the camera, but his body language is aggressive, leaning in close, gesturing sharply. Evelyn's posture is defensive, arms crossed, head turned slightly away. The exchange lasts approximately 4 minutes. 10:55 p.m., Evelyn finds Caroline Hutchins near the bar. She tells her she's leaving early, that she's feeling unwell. Caroline offers to drive her home. Evelyn refuses, insists she's fine, just tired. Caroline watches her walk away and feels a knot of worry in her stomach but doesn't follow. 11:30 p.m., Bradley realizes Evelyn has been gone for over half an hour. He searches the venue, checking the restrooms, the garden, the parking lot. Growing concerned, he asks other guests if they've seen her. No one has. Not recently. 11:47 p.m., final security footage. Evelyn walks alone toward the terrace, her emerald gown flowing behind her. She moves with purpose, almost urgency. Then she steps out of the camera's range. 11:51 p.m., Maria Santos, taking trash to the dumpsters, hears a car door slam somewhere in the darkness beyond the main parking area. Midnight, Margaret Pemberton approaches event organizers in a panic. Her daughter is missing. Where is Evelyn? 12:45 a.m., Charleston Police Department receives the call. By dawn on March 16, 1997, it's a full missing persons investigation. And the question that would haunt everyone for 2 decades was already forming. Who was the man in the shadows? And what did he say that made Evelyn flee into the night? Detective Raymond Fisher caught the case at 1:15 a.m., pulled from his bed by a phone call that would define the rest of his career. By the time he arrived at the Middleton Pinckney house at 2 a.m., the scene was already compromised. Guests had wandered the grounds searching for Evelyn. Footprints crisscrossed everywhere. Evidence, if it had ever existed, was likely contaminated or destroyed. But Fisher was methodical. He secured the perimeter, established a command center, and began interviewing witnesses while memories were still fresh. By sunrise, bloodhounds arrived. The dogs picked up Evelyn's scent immediately, tracking it from the terrace steps across the lawn toward the auxiliary parking area, a gravel lot used for overflow vehicles. There the scent simply stopped. The dogs circled, confused, unable to find the trail continuing in any direction. The implication was clear. Evelyn had entered a vehicle. Her own car, a white Honda Accord, sat untouched in the main lot. Keys in the ignition. Driver's seat adjusted to her height. No signs of struggle. No blood. No torn fabric. Nothing. Over the next 48 hours, Fisher's team interviewed more than 200 gala attendees. The process was exhausting, repetitive, and frustrating. Most people remembered seeing Evelyn during the early part of the evening but couldn't recall her later movements. A few mentioned she seemed distracted or upset, but no one knew why. Bradley Ashworth became the immediate focus of the investigation. Statistics are cruel but clear. When a young woman disappears, investigators look first at the intimate partner. Bradley submitted to 3 separate interviews. He answered every question. He provided detailed timelines. He explained the argument at dinner, just wedding stress, nothing serious. He described searching for Evelyn after 11:30 p.m., a search confirmed by dozens of witnesses who saw him frantically moving through the venue. On March 18, Bradley voluntarily took a polygraph examination. He passed. His alibi was ironclad. From 11:30 p.m. until police arrived after midnight, he'd been inside the main hall, visible to numerous guests and staff. He couldn't have harmed Evelyn. He couldn't have taken her anywhere. Detectives searched Evelyn's apartment on March 17. The space was immaculate, almost obsessively organized. Nothing appeared disturbed except for one detail. Her jewelry box sat slightly askew on her dresser, as if someone had moved it recently and not quite returned it to its exact position. Inside they found the diary. It was small, leather-bound, with gilded edges. But when they opened it, their confusion deepened. The pages were filled with symbols, alternative alphabets, numbers that made no sense, shorthand that followed no recognizable system. It was a cipher, and an elaborate one. Margaret Pemberton explained through tears. Evelyn was obsessed with codes from childhood. She loved puzzles, mysteries, secret languages. She read about cryptography constantly. The diary was sent to cryptographers. They studied it for weeks. Their conclusion was devastating. Without a personal key or context specific to the writer, this cipher may be impossible to break. And so the diary was sealed in an evidence bag, logged and filed away. Its secrets remained locked. Margaret Pemberton stopped sleeping. She stopped eating. She moved through her home on Laguerre Street like a specter, touching Evelyn's things, sitting in Evelyn's room, setting a place for her daughter at the dinner table every single night for 6 months. Judge Pemberton threw himself into the investigation with the same intensity he brought to his courtroom. He demanded daily updates from police. He hired 3 separate private investigation firms. He increased the reward for information from $50,000 to $100,000. Money couldn't buy answers, but he had to do something. Control was his language, and this situation was entirely beyond his control. Thomas Pemberton, just 19 years old, dropped out of college. He couldn't focus on classes while his sister was missing. He couldn't pretend life was normal when nothing would ever be normal again. Caroline Hutchins was consumed by guilt. "I should have driven her home," she told detectives, friends, her therapist, anyone who would listen. "I should have insisted. I should have followed her. I should have known something was wrong." Charleston itself transformed in the wake of Evelyn's disappearance. Mothers clutched their daughters closer. The Heritage Gala was permanently canceled. Dinner party conversations turned dark, speculative, fearful. Could this happen to anyone? Was there a predator among them? Rumors spread like wildfire through the city's social circles. Whispered theories at country clubs and church gatherings. She was having an affair. She owed money to dangerous people. She was pregnant and ran away. She was involved in something illegal. She knew too much about someone powerful. The mystery man from the security footage became Charleston's obsession. Police released enhanced still images. A tall figure in a dark suit, face turned away, body language menacing. Tips flooded in. Every tall man in Charleston was suddenly a suspect. But none of the leads panned out. A psychic called the tip line claiming Evelyn was alive in Atlanta, working in a restaurant. Detectives drove 6 hours to check. It wasn't her. A reported sighting in Savannah sent a team rushing to investigate. The woman they found looked nothing like Evelyn. By month 3, the statistical reality became undeniable. If Evelyn had been abducted, she was almost certainly dead. But without a body, without physical evidence of foul play, the case existed in agonizing limbo. Years later, Detective Fisher would reflect. The worst cases aren't the ones you can't solve. They're the ones where a family never gets to bury their child. Where hope and grief exist simultaneously, forever. Raymond Fisher was 42 years old when Evelyn Pemberton disappeared. He was a 15-year veteran of Charleston PD, divorced, no children, living alone in a modest Mount Pleasant apartment that overlooked the marsh. His life was his work, and Evelyn's case became the center of that life. He kept her photograph on his desk, that final security still, the emerald dress, the last moment she existed in recorded time. He studied it daily, searching for details he might have missed, clues hidden in pixels and shadows. Even as the case officially went cold after the first year, Fisher continued working it. He re-interviewed witnesses on anniversaries. He tracked down every man Evelyn had ever dated, spoken to, passed in a hallway. He studied that damned diary during sleepless nights, trying to find patterns in the cipher, convinced the answers were right there if he could just see them. He became obsessed with the mystery man. "I could see him in that footage," Fisher said years later. "Right there on the screen. I could see him talking to her, watching him make her afraid. I knew he knew what happened. But I couldn't see his face." Fisher's captain eventually pulled him aside. There were other cases. Other victims. Other families who needed justice. The department couldn't dedicate resources to a cold case indefinitely. But Fisher couldn't let go. His apartment walls became covered in case boards, timelines written in red marker, photographs pinned in chronological order, witness statements arranged and rearranged, geometric attempts to decode Evelyn's cipher covering an entire wall. Fellow detectives stopped visiting. They worried about him. Friends drifted away, unable to compete with a ghost for his attention. Years passed. 1998, 1999, 2000. The media attention faded. Tips dried up to nothing. The Pemberton family still called him monthly, desperate for updates he didn't have. Judge Pemberton died in 2003 of a heart attack at 64. His friends said he died of a broken heart. Margaret's health deteriorated. Thomas moved to Oregon, unable to live in Charleston's shadow anymore. And Detective Fisher kept working the case in stolen hours between active assignments. I made her a promise, he'd tell anyone who asked why he couldn't move on. The first night, standing in that parking lot at dawn, I looked at her mother and promised I'd find her daughter. I'd bring her home. It was a promise he would never fulfill. Every cold case has its moments of false hope. Evelyn's case had more than most. 1998. A body is discovered in the Cooper River, female, early 20s, decomposed. The Pemberton family is called to the morgue. Margaret insists on identifying the remains herself. Detective Fisher tries to prepare her, but how do you prepare a mother for that moment? It's not Evelyn. Margaret collapses in the hallway. She's hospitalized for 3 days. 1999. A man walks into Charleston PD claiming he helped dispose of a body at a construction site in West Ashley in March 1997. He provides specific details, location, approximate depth, even the color of the tarp allegedly used. Cadaver dogs are deployed. Ground-penetrating radar is brought in. Excavation begins. Media crews arrive. The Pembertons wait by their phone. After 4 days of digging, nothing is found. The man is arrested for filing a false police report. He'd been seeking the reward money. 2001. Bradley Ashworth, now a practicing attorney, is questioned again after a new witness comes forward claiming they overheard a much more serious argument between Bradley and Evelyn on the night of the gala. Bradley immediately retains legal counsel. The investigation intensifies. Then the witness recants, admitting she'd fabricated the story after seeing a television program about the case. The lead evaporates. Bradley is cleared again, but the suspicion never entirely leaves him. 2003. Advanced facial recognition technology is applied to the mystery man footage. 3 possible matches are identified in the Charleston area based on height, build, and posture analysis. All 3 men are brought in for questioning. All 3 are eventually cleared through alibis and timeline elimination. 2005. A true crime blog post goes viral, presenting an elaborate theory that Evelyn faked her own disappearance and is living under an assumed name somewhere in Europe. The post includes fabricated evidence, photographs of a woman in Paris who resembles Evelyn, fake witness statements, even a supposed email exchange. The story is compelling, detailed, and completely false. But it spreads across the internet, giving the Pembertons a week of agonizing hope before it's debunked. 2007. The diary is sent to FBI cryptographers at Quantico. These are experts who've cracked codes for national security cases, who've decoded messages from terrorists and organized crime networks. They spend 6 months analyzing Evelyn's cipher. Their final report concludes, without a personal key or context unique to the subject, this encryption system may never be broken. We recommend exploring alternative investigative avenues. That report nearly destroys Detective Fisher. He takes 3 weeks of personal leave. Some colleagues think he might not come back. 2010. A man dying of cancer in a Georgia hospital makes a deathbed confession about killing a young woman in Charleston in 1997. He mentions the name Evelyn to a nurse. The nurse contacts authorities. Fisher drives 5 hours to reach the hospital before the man dies. But when he interviews him, the timeline doesn't match. The location details are wrong. It's another dead end. By 2015, the case file is officially marked Inactive Cold Case Archives. Detective Fisher retires that same year at age 60, having never solved his defining case. At his retirement party, surrounded by colleagues celebrating his career, he doesn't smile. He stands by the window with a beer he barely drinks and says to no one in particular, "She's still out there somewhere. And I'm leaving her behind." Margaret Pemberton stops leaving her house after 2008. She's 71, her health failing, her spirit broken by a decade of unanswered questions. Evelyn's room remains exactly as it was on March 14, 1997. Art supplies on the desk. Clothes hanging in the closet, organized by color. That jewelry box with the empty space where the diary once sat. Every March 15th, Margaret lights a candle. Every July 8th, Evelyn's birthday. She bakes a lemon cake with buttercream frosting, Evelyn's favorite since childhood. She cuts a slice and eats it alone at the kitchen table, tears running down her face. Thomas returns to Charleston only twice after moving to Oregon. Once for his father's funeral in 2003, once for his mother's 75th birthday in 2012. Both visits are brief. The city suffocates him with memories. My sister disappeared, he later reflects in an interview, and so did my family. We all became ghosts haunting the same house. Caroline Hutchins channels her survivor's guilt into advocacy. She becomes a spokesperson for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, helping other families navigate the nightmare of a missing loved one. But she thinks of Evelyn every single day. Sometimes, driving through Charleston, she'll see a woman with dark hair and her heart will stop for a moment before reality crashes back. Bradley Ashworth becomes a successful corporate attorney. He marries, has 2 children, builds a life. But he never speaks publicly about Evelyn until 2015, when a podcast about the case contacts him. That was the worst period of my life, he tells them. I loved her. And then she was gone. And everyone looked at me like I was a monster. By 2016, Evelyn Grace Pemberton exists mostly as an internet curiosity. Cold case forums debate theories. True crime podcasts dedicate episodes to her disappearance but have nothing new to say. The locked diary becomes an urban legend, an impossible puzzle, unsolvable secrets, a mystery within a mystery. On March 15, 2017, the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, a small memorial service is held at Magnolia Cemetery. 12 people attend. Margaret is too ill to come. Someone places 20 white roses at a symbolic grave marker. It feels like a funeral for someone who might still be alive. It feels like giving up. Detective Alicia Chin joins Charleston PD Cold Case Unit in January 2018. She's 31 years old with a master's degree in forensic psychology and a personal specialty in historical cryptography. She'd written her thesis on cipher systems used during World War II. She's young, brilliant, and completely unaware of the emotional baggage surrounding the Pemberton case. To her, it's not 2 decades of failure and heartbreak. It's a puzzle waiting to be solved. During her first week, she reviews the cold case archives, and the diary immediately catches her attention. Where others saw an impenetrable code, Chin sees patterns, structure, logic hidden beneath apparent chaos. She requests the original diary from evidence on January 22, 2018. It's been sealed in an evidence bag for 21 years, yellow police tape still wrapped around it like a warning. When she opens it, the leather is worn soft, the pages brittle with age, but the symbols are clear and deliberate. Chin spends 3 months analyzing the cipher. She uses modern computational linguistics software unavailable in 1997. She researches Evelyn's known interests, Renaissance art, particularly works involving hidden symbolism, puzzle books from her apartment, her college papers on cryptographic history. Chin hypothesizes that Evelyn's code is a polyalphabetic substitution cipher combined with personal symbols representing specific people and places. It's brilliant in its complexity, intensely personal, and therefore nearly impossible for outsiders to crack without the key. The breakthrough comes on a Tuesday afternoon in April 2018. Chin is researching Edgar Allan Poe's connection to South Carolina when she remembers The Gold Bug, Poe's famous short story about cryptography set near Charleston. She pulls Evelyn's college transcript and discovers a paper Evelyn wrote analyzing that exact story. On impulse, Chin tests a key based on a quote from The Gold Bug. She inputs it into her decryption software along with personal information about Evelyn, birth date, family names, significant locations. Suddenly, fragments decode. Then words. Then sentences. Then entire paragraphs. The diary opens like a door that's been locked for 20 years. Chin reads the entries spanning January 1997 to March 14, 1997, the day before Evelyn vanished. Her hands begin shaking by the 3rd page. The diary details a secret relationship. An affair that began in November 1996. Not with Bradley Ashworth. With someone else. Someone whose initials appear again and again throughout the decoded passages. The entries chronicle escalating danger. January entries describe passion and excitement. February entries show growing anxiety. By March the tone shifts to fear. Evelyn writes about DH's jealousy. His demands for secrecy. His increasingly threatening behavior when she tried to end the relationship. His warnings about what would happen if she told anyone. The final entry is dated March 14, 1997, written in the morning before the gala. DH called again last night. 3 times. He says if I tell anyone about us, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. He knows everything about me, my family, my schedule, where I go. I'm terrified, but I can't keep living like this. Tomorrow night at the gala, I'm going to end this. I'm going to tell Bradley everything and let DH face the consequences of his choices. I'm done living in fear. I'm done being his secret. Detective Chen closes the diary. Her hands are shaking so badly she can barely reach for her phone. This isn't a missing persons case anymore. This is a murder investigation. And the killer's initials are right there on the page. Detective Chen assembles a task force within hours. When she calls Margaret Pemberton to inform her the diary has been decoded, the elderly woman weeps so hard she can't speak. Finally she whispers, "My baby left us clues. She was trying to tell us what happened. She was trying to come home." Chen begins with the initials. DH cross-referenced against every aspect of Evelyn's life in 1996 and 1997. The list is surprisingly short. David Hutchinson, Caroline's older brother. But records show he was living in Boston throughout 1996 to 1997, working for a financial firm. His alibi is documented through employment records and lease agreements. Dennis Howard, owner of an art gallery where Evelyn had briefly interned in 1996. But Howard was in a long-term relationship with another man, and interviews with his partner confirmed they were together the night Evelyn disappeared. Then, Daniel Harrington, age 52 in 1997. Married with 3 children. Prominent Charleston businessman and, critically, president of the Charleston Heritage Foundation, the organization that hosted the gala. He would have been at the event. He had access to every area of the venue. He had social standing that would make an affair catastrophic if revealed. Chen pulls Harrington's background. In early 1997 he was being seriously considered for a federal appointment to a National Arts Council, a prestigious position that would have elevated his status considerably. An affair with a woman 30 years his junior, especially one that might have involved workplace power dynamics, would have destroyed that opportunity and his reputation. Chen obtains phone records from 1997, painstakingly archived by the telecommunications company. Harrington's cell phone shows 17 calls to Evelyn's number in February and March 1997. The final call, March 14, 1997 at 4:37 p.m., matching perfectly with the diary entry about DH's threatening phone call. She pulls the gala security footage again, this time armed with specific focus. She isolates the mystery man at 10:20 p.m., the figure arguing with Evelyn near the garden entrance. She obtains photographs of Daniel Harrington from 1997, gala attendance photos, newspaper articles, social event coverage. She compares body type, height, posture, the way he holds himself. It's not definitive. Faces can't be matched. But everything is consistent. Chen begins interviewing people who knew Harrington in 1997. His former secretary remembers him being unusually stressed that spring, making personal phone calls with his office door closed, which wasn't his normal behavior. A golfing partner recalls Harrington taking a sudden 2-week vacation in late March 1997 to deal with a family emergency. There was no family emergency documented anywhere. Chen obtains a search warrant for properties Harrington owned in 1997. He'd sold most of his real estate holdings over the years, but records show that in March 1997, he owned a hunting cabin in rural Berkeley County, 47 miles northwest of Charleston. He'd purchased it in 1994 and sold it in 2002. Cell tower data from March 1997, primitive by today's standards but still available, places Harrington's cell phone pinging towers near the cabin area on March 16, 1997, the day after Evelyn vanished. On May 15, 2018, cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar equipment are deployed at the former cabin property, now owned by a real estate developer planning a residential subdivision. The search takes 3 days. On May 22, 2018 at 4:37 p.m., exactly 21 years and 68 days after Evelyn disappeared, they find disturbed earth 200 yards from the old cabin foundation, in a wooded area that was slated for clearing the following week. Excavation begins immediately. 2 feet down they find fabric. Emerald green silk, rotted but recognizable. 3 feet down they find skeletal remains. Dental records confirm what everyone already knows. Evelyn Grace Pemberton has been found. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with a heavy object. A forensic anthropologist determines the injury pattern matches a stone or marble object with a flat surface and considerable weight. She'd been there the entire time. Buried in shallow earth while Charleston searched. while her mother set places at the dinner table, while Detective Fisher covered his walls with case boards, while 20 years passed and the world moved on. She'd been there, waiting to be found. Daniel Harrington is arrested at his Mount Pleasant home on May 24, 2018 at 6 a.m. He's 73 years old now, retired, still married to the same woman after 48 years. His grandchildren's photographs cover the mantel. His neighbors are shocked. He coached Little League for a decade, one says to news cameras. He organized the neighborhood watch. He seems so normal. Charleston explodes with the news. The cold case that defined a generation suddenly has an ending. National media descends. Margaret Pemberton, bedridden and on hospice care, watches the arrest coverage on television, tears streaming down her face. Detective Chin and her partner conduct the interrogation. Harrington arrives with his attorney, a prominent criminal defense lawyer who immediately advises complete silence. But Chin has leverage. She has the diary. She has the phone records. She has the body. She has forensic evidence linking him to the crime. Fibers from the burial site match carpet from his 1997 BMW, a car he'd sold in 1998. She has records showing a heavy marble bookend from his office went missing after March 1997, never replaced. The interrogation lasts 8 hours. For the first 7, Harrington says nothing beyond no comment and on advice of counsel. But in hour 8 something breaks. Perhaps it's exhaustion. Perhaps it's the weight of 21 years of lying. Perhaps it's Chen's methodical presentation of evidence that makes denial impossible. Harrington begins talking. His attorney tries to stop him. He waves the man off. The confession is recorded, transcribed, and devastating in its details. The affair began at a November 1996 fundraiser. Evelyn was young, beautiful, talented, passionate about art. He was powerful, unhappy in his marriage, flattered by her attention. It was supposed to be brief. An excitement. A secret. But Evelyn wanted more. She developed real feelings. She started pressing for him to leave his wife. She talked about a future together. He panicked. His federal appointment was pending. His reputation was everything. If the affair became public, everything he'd built would be destroyed. He tried to end it in February. She refused to accept it. She became angry, then desperate, then threatening. She said she'd tell his wife. She said she'd tell the appointment committee. She said she'd go public. At the gala on March 15th, she found him in the garden at 10:20 p.m. She told him she was done hiding, done being his secret. She gave him until midnight to tell his wife himself, or she would do it for him. They argued. He followed her to the parking lot at 11:47 p.m. He convinced her to get in his car to talk privately, away from everyone. She trusted him enough to agree. He drove to his hunting cabin under the pretense of discussion. During the drive she realized the danger. She tried to get out of the car. He locked the doors. By the time they reached the cabin she was terrified. He describes the moment in clinical detail. Her begging, his rage, the marble bookend from his trunk, the silence afterward. He buried her before dawn on March 16th. Then he drove home, showered, kissed his wife, had breakfast with his children, and went to his office as if nothing had happened. For 21 years he lived with what he'd done. I told myself she'd run away, he says on the recording, his voice flat and emotionless. I told myself maybe someone else found her body. I told myself anything but the truth. But I knew. Every day I knew what I'd done. I knew where she was. On August 15, 2018, Daniel Harrington pleads guilty to first-degree murder to avoid trial and the possibility of a death sentence. He's sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. He offers no apology to the Pemberton family. He makes no statement of remorse. Margaret Pemberton watches the sentencing via video link from her hospice bed. When the judge pronounces the sentence, life without parole, she closes her eyes. Now I can rest, she whispers. She dies 6 days later, finally able to let go.